Joining me today is our very own national spokesman, Robert Charles, and we're back with the Reb and Rob show. Bobby, thank you so much for joining today. Looking forward to our conversation.
I always love these conversations.
It's really great. So, Bobby, here we are. We're at a real crossroads for the nation. Our major institutions are being constantly challenged. The significance of parenting, the role of families and church, our election process, our police, the borders, our Supreme Court, even the very idea of truth. We're really living in what seems to me like a very chaotic, unaccountable time. And this is one of three issues that I really want to speak with you about today. How do we maintain our sense of hope and our moral compass, our belief that goodness will prevail? And with all of the things that you've experienced through your lifetime, the things that you've done in SEAM, I know that you are always pointing toward optimism because you seem to be really unwavering and believing the eternal optimist.
You know, it's a great question, Rebecca, and it's timely. I think we all in our lives know that when we really put our minds to something, we can get it done. When we really do believe that the future is bright, often we make it that way. And so let me give you 5 basic reasons just off the top of my head that I'll say to remain optimistic about the future of America. And as I do this, let me remind everybody watching that this is the kind of principles that the founders had even when they had no basis for it, when Lincoln had, that Theodore Roosevelt had, that Dwight Eisenhower had, going into Operation Overlord, that Ronald Reagan had when he brought down the Soviet Union, and that Donald Trump had when he lifted this country up economically and in other ways. So, we have to kind of remember that the horizon doesn't really change. The compass doesn't change. And so here are a couple of thoughts. First, the history of the country is a history of self-correction. It is a history of making mistakes, getting back up, dusting ourselves off, and moving forward again. And that is exactly what we're going to have to do here. The Constitution gives us the means to self-correct, and all the way back to de Tocqueville, the amazing thing about Americans is we do recognize our mistakes, we do fix them, and we do get up and keep moving forward. The second big one is just inside all of us, our conscience, right? If we individually know what's right and wrong, if we, even when we get off the reservation, we come back because we know our conscience tells us, nah, that's not the right direction. I got to get back. That's what the country does too. And so, the second big thing is that in a country of 350 million people, 240 million are Christian. And a number above that and beyond that are of other faiths. And in their heart of hearts, they know what's right. They know what's wrong. They know this transgender baloney is nothing but a hokum. And in the end, they know that we have to get back to doing right. So again, faith is a second big, strong reason. The third is the Bill of Rights. Our Bill of Rights is there for a reason. And when George Mason and a number of others, when people like Madison said to the Constitutional Convention, okay, now go out there and get this Constitution, all these articles passed, a lot of them, Randolph and a number of the others said, no. We're not going to pass that Constitution unless there is a Bill of Rights that guarantees. And people said, come on, when are they ever going to take our guns away? And George Mason said, someday that federal government could get so big that they want to take all of our rights away. And look, you've got a North Carolina governor who's decided that he's going to declare an emergency and take away the parents' rights to change public education. You got all kinds of people attacking the Bill of Rights. But you know what? It's like Churchill said, you can step on it, you can crush it, you can try to destroy it. And when everything's said and done, the truth is still right there. And our Bill of Rights is right there. And we need to use it, speak up, go worship, go speak your mind, go travel, go protect your family, do all those things that that we're entitled to do. So that's the third big one. The fourth big one is the idea that freedom is always under, the thought comes to me that freedom is always under attack in any era. So we think our era is special. It's not special. I mean, it's special in some ways. We happen to be part of it, which makes it special. But, reality is freedom is always under attack. And so there's nothing new about that. We have to rally. And, I guess the last big thought I have is that in concert with history and with the way things go, you have to also remember the objective numbers. What are the numbers? We are the largest economy in the world, period. we're at least a quarter or a fifth larger than China at its best, and China's economy is faltering. Okay, so we're in debt. We got to get that under control. We got some other things to work on, but the economy is the number one in the world. And why is that? It's not driven by the government. It's driven by the government getting out of the way so that Americans can do what they do. Okay. And our military is the number one military in the world. We hear a lot about China, and we should talk about China. But the truth be told, they have 2 operational carrier battle groups. We have 11 carrier battle groups. We have the largest military budget in the world, $600 billion. It needs to be reoriented. It needs to be we need to get out of this woke business and get into the readiness business again. But every objective indicator that you look at, we may not be at the top, but if you aggregate them, we remain on the numbers, the number one country in the world. And how about this? Where do people want to go? Do you see people breaking in to the borders of Russia or China to get in there? I don't think so. And neither Botswana nor Venezuela, okay? Nor, and not to rag on Botswana, but no other country in the world. They're not breaking in to get into Cuba. They're breaking in to get here. Why? Because we are the beacon of the world for freedom, for prosperity, for the pursuit of happiness. And I think that's why people should say, you know what? We're doing just fine. We need to remember our core values and just keep coming back to them.
That's exactly right. I love the optimism. And a great reminder, our founders, their vision really was all a part of that belief that we have God-given rights, and those God-given rights can never go away. And I think when we remind ourselves of that, then we understand that we've got a duty, an obligation for our children or grandchildren and future generations to get up and speak and to take advantage of these great freedoms that our founding fathers were sure to enshrine in our founding documents. So it is really good news when you think about all of the crazy that's going on, just to be uplifted, to remember and be reminded that people are still coming into this nation, unfortunately, illegally, but people want to be in America because of the great freedoms that this country affords, and you don't see that in other parts of the world. So this is really good news. Thank you so much. I appreciate that perspective, Bobby.
Rebecca, I'm reminded sometimes when we're talking on this show, some things pop into mind that are unexpected. And, I'm reminded how much, and I worked for Ronald Reagan, and he was a huge influence in my public consciousness as a young person, 21, 22, 23, because he was so consistent and he was so positive. And the things he said were unlikely to happen. The things that everybody else said were unlikely to happen. And he said, no, the inevitability, they will happen. And he lived to see the Soviet Union disintegrate in front of him. He lived to see tax cuts lift families up, just tens of millions of jobs. He proved out his optimism. It wasn't empty optimism. It wasn't, sort of happy talk. It was all real. And when he left office, George Herbert Walker Bush was a former military hero, all these things, but he was not an inveterate optimist. Reagan was an inveterate optimist. And when George Herbert Walker Bush, for whom I also worked, opened the desk drawer after Reagan had left, there was a message. There was an envelope in it. And he opened it up and it said, George, there are going to be days when it's tough. Don't let the turkeys get you down. And that's it. That's us, right? There are days when it's tough. Don't let the turkeys get you down.
There are days. Yeah, that really is encouraging. I do want to shift to a specific challenge, one that really is growing, and that is national security. Now, you've recently written a lot about this topic. I encourage our listeners to check out AMAC.us or download the AMAC News app, because we've got so many great articles on this topic. And you've been on Fox News, and you're a former Assistant Secretary of State and Naval Intelligence Officer. Can you help us understand the balance between why Communist China is a threat and why you think that we can handle this threat if we are unified, of course? In effect, really help us apply your sense of optimism and realism to China's rise.
Yeah. So again, very timely. Sometimes we think of China as a faraway place, until it makes us all sick or makes us all have to deal with some new national security threat or integrates itself into our homes through televisions and whatever else they're trying to get at us with. Look, it is a genuine threat. And I think Americans need to understand that as the Soviet Union was a threat in the 60s and 70s, and early 80s until Reagan really turned that around. This government that China has is a communist government. Communism is a form of government that essentially takes away individuality, takes away faith, and replaces it with a kind of a worship of the state and the capacity, and also the willingness. People are cowed into essentially being oppressed. We do not want that in this country, nor do we want to have an all-out war with China, even though they're laying in ICBMs and they are trying to position themselves as a force that can dominate the world. Their buddy Russia isn't doing too great, and North Korea and Iran aren't doing too great either. But that is their will, that is their desire, and we should never underestimate it. So what does it mean? Since it's better to deter wars than it is to fight them, you have to be ready to fight them, but you also have to be determined to try to deter them if you can. The best way to do that is to upfund your military, make it clear you will engage, make it clear that your political will, your national will is as strong as your capability. And we've had some issues with this president. This president doesn't seem to understand that China is not a peer competitor. They're intending to displace the United States globally. They're trying to do that. But I won't go into the details, but the short of it is that we know what they're about, and I think we need to take it seriously. When China says they want to dominate the world, let's not pretend that they're playing checkers. They want to dominate the world. So on the one hand, we have to train our military, stop this business about wokeism, stop the business about imagining that wars are not fought to be won. If we fight a war with China, we must win that war. But in order to prevent that war, we need to prepare in a way that is convincing to China that it is not worth their effort. In fact, that they will ultimately find themselves on the ash heap of history, to borrow from Reagan, if they attack Taiwan, if they try to take out key components of the United States national security apparatus around the world or our vital interests. So on the one hand, they're a real threat. On the other, I think we have to have confidence in ourselves, Rebecca, and this is key. I mean, whether you're talking about, why Meade won at Gettysburg or Grant won at Vicksburg, or the United States won with our allies at Normandy, or why we won at Okinawa or Iwo Jima, and as we approach Memorial Day, why did that happen? It happened because right here in the heart, where it really mattered, people said, we not only have to win, we can win, we will win, and we win as a free people. No one's telling us we have to. We know in our heart of hearts that freedom depends on us holding the line. And I think if we can regain the very well-grounded and very justified sense that America's principles and our objective indicators of who we are in fact what the world wants, kind of what we said a moment ago, then what will happen is we will radiate that understanding of ourselves. And China, which also understands itself to be an oppressive country, will step back a pace. And it's a balance, right? Freedom is always under attack. China is absolutely wants to displace America. But I think if we have confidence in ourselves, just like when you walk out the door in the morning, you got to have confidence in whatever you're doing and maintain it.
Absolutely. So we know where we need to get, we know where we need to improve, we need to be ready for a rising China, but also be reminded that we are objectively still the most powerful country in the world. So this really comes down to leadership, I believe. And the challenge, of course, Bobby, is staying there and really defending our values. And one that comes to mind when I think of defending values, I mean, I can't help but think of the upcoming Memorial Day before us. And I know that you have many relatives buried at Arlington National Cemetery. You served yourself, and you highly value veterans, as we all do here at AMAC. So many of our members are veterans, and you've interviewed many veterans. I wonder if you could sort of look toward Memorial Day, if you could perhaps tell us a short, inspiring story about maybe a veteran from World War II, one from Korea, one from Vietnam. You've got some great stories.
I absolutely will, Rebecca. And what a great way to conclude or to kind of lift people also on this important day. I have to give a speech on Memorial Day. And one of the things that I want to say forward is that we do a lot of remembering, and we should remember. And we should remember that America is not an accident. It's a product of sacrifice. And a lot of those that sacrificed lie in graves all over this country as a testament to their commitment to us, and that imposes a burden on us for sure. But I Yes, it's ironic. I just less than a week ago, Rebecca, spent an entire day last Saturday walking Arlington National Cemetery. My father's buried there, my grandfather. I have a number of other relatives there, and saw the changing of the guard for the first time with a female service member, and she did a spectacular job. I then wandered over to see some of my colleagues who had died on 9/11. And then I went and I visited Colin Powell's grave, and it's a very interesting thing. His stone is no different from any of the other little white stones all over Arlington National Cemetery. And all it says is his name, General, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, birth, death. That's it. And, and there are so many veterans in that cemetery. So 3 quick stories. One is, and I'll say them because they relate to vets that I have gotten to know or knew or know their families. But I also would remind everybody that on Memorial Day, there are veterans all around you. And if you're not one yourself, if you are, you understand this, or if you're from a family of veterans, but, go to a Memorial Day event and think hard for a little bit. One guy is a guy that's right here, I live in it's kind of a farm town area, or an area, small town, a lot of farms. There was a young farm kid who went off to World War II named Joseph Ford Berry, and you can look him up. The entire series of Band of Brothers is built around a veteran, Richard Winters, who won the Distinguished Service Cross. Well, this young farm boy from this little town in Maine won the Distinguished Service Cross. And what did he do? In the middle of the attack on Sicily, the Germans overran the American positions, wanted to push them back into the sea. That was our first amphibious landing of World War II, and it was a disaster. And we almost did get pushed back into the sea, but for acts like the act that this young boy at the time performed. His company, about 100 people, were pinned in an area in Sicily, and the Panzer tanks were coming in large numbers. And he ran the distance of a couple of football fields back across the open field in order to get to an anti-tank weapon, and he turned that weapon on the Panzer tanks, who then immediately pivoted on him. And of course, that was predictable. That's what he meant to do. And his entire company was able to slip away. And he continued firing on those tanks until they came, encircled him, and killed him. And he will be celebrated here in this town as a true American hero, received the Distinguished Service Cross for saving his entire company. The second one is a Korean War vet who happens to have been my 8th grade math teacher, of all things. And I use his example because he and his twin brother went away to Korea and fought and came home, and they both were fine. They got home, and this notion about applying sacrifice forward is why I mentioned this Korean War vet. He got home, taught math. His brother, in the 1950s, his twin brother got sick. And his twin brother got sick with a disease that affected his kidneys. And he was told he had 6 weeks to live. So this young math teacher, who was also a Korean War vet, who had seen a lot die around him, did not want to see his brother die. And he asked the doctor, so how is it that I have 2 good kidneys and my brother has 2 bad kidneys and I only need 1 kidney? Why can't I give one of mine to him? The doctor says it's never been done. We don't do that. Can't be done. And that night, the doctor called Ron Herrick, and you can look Ron Herrick up. He's my math teacher. Called him back and said, if it would ever work, it would work with twins. So, bottom line, he gave him his kidney. They both lived to old age. And last year, 100,000 kidney transplants were done because Ron Herrick applied what he thought was proper sacrifice forward. Last story is a Vietnam vet, and we have a lot of people around us who are Vietnam vets who were not properly recognized when they returned from the war. Your father's a veteran. I have veterans in my family. Reality is that very often people go away idealistic and they come home a bit beaten up. And we need to remember that what they gave out there, wherever they were, back lines, forward lines, it doesn't matter. They gave something that we need to recognize as meaningful. And the vet that I'm thinking of was my history teacher, high school history teacher, Dave Cook. And he came home and he realized he was 101st Airborne. He had been front lines for more than a year. He came home and realized there was no way. There was no internet. There was no way for the 101st Airborne to talk to each other. So he set up a newsletter. And lo and behold, it worked. It brought thousands and thousands of vets together. What did he do? He applied what he'd seen. He applied that idea that I'm going to do something that I can do for others. I'm going to do it because I can do it. And he did it. So I asked him at one point recently, tell me something that happened out of that was meaningful. And I may or may not have shared this with members before, but I'll tell the one story. He told me several, but one that was really poignant for me was that he was in a firefight in a particular location in Vietnam. And so this is what a guy called him on the phone and said, hey, I'm looking for this other vet. And his name was Jack. And Dave Cook, my history teacher, said, well, what's his last name? He said, I don't know. And then he told the story that a guy was running across an open field in Vietnam during a firefight, stumbled on a medic. There were 4 guys there. He was working on 3. The 4th one was bled out and was going to die. And so the guy that stumbled on the medic said, hey, what about the 4th guy? And he said, well, there's no vein. You can't get to him. He's bled out. He's white. He said, what if I find a vein? He said, I'll put some plasma in him. So it turns out the guy that stumbled on him found a vein in his ankle. They put plasma in him. He comes back. Now, 40 years later, the guy who was calling my history teacher was the guy who'd been saved. And he was looking for the guy. All he knew was his name was Jack, who had saved his life out on the battlefield. Dave put the 2 of them together. That is applying sacrifice forward. We can all do that. As long as we appreciate what went before, as long as we appreciate how lucky we are, we can then take that luck, that good fortune, that sacrifice, and apply it forward. And in many ways, to me, that's what Memorial Day is about.
I love this story. Beautiful. I love it. Yes, we must apply their sacrifice forward, as you put it, Bobby, and we do that by doing everything we can with our lives to really honor the sacrifice that these folks have made for us. And what a beautiful story. Thank you, Bobby. These are really inspirational. And sometimes just by remembering how others have used their lives, we are lifted to use ours more fully and more purposefully for good. So thank you. And to everyone out there listening, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll have Bobby Charles back with us again real soon to dig into the issues. In the meantime, I wish you all a blessed, safe, and happy Memorial Weekend. Thank you so much.